Okay, folks, we're going to do something a little bit different here. It's your buddy Mike Messier. We're having a straight-to-camera countdown. All these things I'm catching up on. This is my review of Hornswoggle, or Dylan. I'm trying to remember his last name. Postl. Life is short and so am I. Now, I just listened to the audio book. I don't have the actual physical book to show you, but I listened to his book on Audible. And, look, I lived through the PG era of WWE. I guess technically we're still in that. But the 2008 to basically 2019, 2020 was really a bad time. I think most people would agree. Then, yes, there were some stretches that were better. And some highlights, The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels matches, etc. But for a good stretch of that time, they were creatively restricted. They were trying to kind of replenish their audience with kids after the whole Attitude Era, after the Ruthless Aggression Era. And a big part of that was a young man named Dylan, who was basically the character of Hornswoggle. And if you don't remember, Hornswoggle made his debut, from what I remember, coming out underneath the ring and helping a wrestler named Finlay, who was an Irish brute. And Hornswoggle was this mischievous leprechaun. And I was going to say little leprechaun, but, Peter Dinklage might find this video and hashtag me. And I mention that because Peter Dinklage, who's a great actor, I will not take that away from him. The Station Agent is a great Peter Dinklage movie, and I know he did great work in Tits and Dragons, as I call it, Game of Thrones, as people call it. But Peter Dinklage did not like the idea that Disney was doing a Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs remake with live actors. Mr. Dinklage, Peter, if I could, thought that was exploitive of dwarfs, and I remember at the time Hornswoggle took issue with that. Dylan took issue with that. He said, "Hey man, I'll play a fucking dwarf," So I kind of, since that situation, I've kind of liked Dylan's attitude on things. I think he's, just having listened to his whole audio book in basically a day and a half, I like the guy more now than I did before, to be quite honest. And I'll give you several reasons. First of all, he reads his own audiobook. He narrates his own audiobook. I really get pissed when people don't, read their own fucking audiobook. And I'm glad that Dylan did that, and that's not easy. And it's not easy to write a book. I don't know if he had a co-writer. I don't think so. I mean, I think he wrote this thing from the heart. And, but it's well structured. I mean, it's like a timeline of events from beginning to fucking current whenever he finished this thing, which I think was about 2016. But moving forth, he talks about his childhood. I wasn't expecting that. I mean, and he kind of goes against the grain. It's not really like he got bullied at school. He said that he was always the first one to kind of crack a joke about himself. And so that always kind of broke the tension, and other kids wouldn't really bully him because Dylan had a keen sense of humor and knew that, his stature, so to speak, was, something different for people to deal with. And he just seemed to have a real gift for negotiating that and making other people, even if they wanted to bully him, he diffused them, or he made people feel comfortable around him. And I give him a lot of credit for that. One thing that some people are going to have a hard time with, I didn't. I actually enjoy the honesty. His nucleus family, his biological mom, it seemed like Dylan still harbors some resentment. I don't blame him. He said that his mom kind of thought that his being a little person or a midget, he's not afraid to use the word midget either. She used that situation to kind of put herself on the local map. I believe in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, basically his mom, where they grew up, his mom, used Dylan's situation to kind of make a name for herself. And she was always kind of making a spectacle. And Dylan talks about, I think they went to Disney World, and Dylan had just had some type of surgery, and he's, they're having to push him around in a wheelchair, and he's still a young kid. And his mom's making a big fuss and pushing them to the front of every line and just kind of making a spectacle of things. And if you remember what it's like to be a kid, You don't want your mother embarrassing you. You know, I mean, that's one of the worst things. And people always like to diminish that type of experience. Oh, well, you know, you shouldn't worry what other people think. Well, fuck yourself, you know, because if you haven't lived through that type of thing, you just don't understand, assholes. But Dylan, I understand, buddy. So, very interesting stuff. He's also very self-reflective. He talks about when his father remarried a woman named Dorothy, who he later came to think of as his own mother, which is nice. You know, his stepmother, but he felt like she was his true mother after a time. And she had 2 children of her own, I think 2 sons. So suddenly he had 2 stepbrothers, and the feudings-ons in the family of this new family, this, you know, blended family as they call it these days. Dylan, his stepbrothers, his stepmother, and his father all trying to live under one roof. And some of the hostilities, because now Dylan's got to share a bedroom with another kid, you know? So, I mean, it's just, you know, some really, I mean, I find it powerful. Other people may not. Then he discovers, you know, was it through one of those brothers or through a friend? Or I think he had another brother. Yeah, he actually had a brother and a sister from his dad's previous marriage to his mom. It gets a little complicated. It's actually Dylan's mother had 2 prior children, and so they were half siblings through the mother, through Dylan's mother, Hornswoggle's mother, and he talks about them as well, but with, I believe it was his older brother that got him into pro wrestling through the action figures, actually. It sounds like Dylan's first love of wrestling came through action figures, which is kind of interesting. And I'm not sure of Dylan's exact age. I want to say he was born somewhere around 1990. But he talks about the figures, and he goes into a little detail. I mean, some of my friends would really like this. He talks about those Hasbro figures that were made in Rhode Island, by the way, for all my Rhode Island friends. He talks about the action figures doing press slams and bear hugs, and how the different Hogan figures did different moves. So it's just kind of cool, because those Hasbro figures they really weren't made to be played with, I think. Like, they were more for display than for roughing around. I mean, I think it wasn't until you got into the Jakks Pacific era, the late 90s or the mid 90s for WWF figures, that you could really play with them. The Remco AWA were kind of ahead of their time, because they were for the time, they were, you know, you could do stuff with them. Anyway, I could go down that path all night, but I won't. But yeah, I found Dylan to be a sympathetic guy. I did find myself sharing, I think, his frustrations with himself. One thing I felt very millennial based on Hornswoggle Dylan is, like, he almost fucked himself a couple of times in life, and maybe he did miss other opportunities, because a couple of times he's saying that he's sitting there looking at the phone ringing, and he doesn't recognize the number on caller ID, so he doesn't answer the phone. And one of those times, it was the WWE, as represented by Tommy Dreamer, calling him to offer him a job. And another time, it was Steve Austin calling Hornswoggle to offer to put him on the podcast, on the Stone Cold podcast. So, you know, it's like Hornswoggle doesn't learn from his mistakes sometimes. If, you know, he tells at least twice in the book he could have really lost opportunities because he didn't recognize a fucking phone number on the phone, and he's looking right at the phone and he's not answering it because he doesn't recognize the number. Well, buddy, you're in the entertainment world, and so if you get some random numbers sometimes, yes, I know it could be some magazine salesman or some insurance fraud thing, but he doesn't pick up the phone. So I'm kind of frustrated. The other thing, as an entertainer myself, as an actor myself, I did cringe a bit when I heard that, you know, the original Raw general manager thing, going back 10 or 12 years, it was revealed to be Hornswoggle. It was a fucking fart in church. It was a horrible reveal. Well, that was supposed to be, and he tells the story quite well, it was supposed to be a new character. Like, Dylan was supposed to turn heel, abandon Hornswoggle character altogether. He was going to become like a heel Italian tough guy manager, but he couldn't pull off an Italian accent. And he couldn't even do like a tough guy voice. And so he kind of let this fucking opportunity slip through his fingers. He also mentions a few times that even before then, when he was like just getting started with Hornswoggle, he had this like really tumultuous relationship with a female, and sometimes Hornswoggle would skip out on WWE weekend shows, like just not go or tell him to take him off the show because he wanted to deal with his, relationship. And you can see basically the way that I interpreted through Dylan's, relating these stories. I think what happened is the WWE loved him, Hornswoggle, when he was because he started so young. He was with the company, I think he was 19 or 20 years old. But basically, they loved him when he was a new novelty. But then when he started, asking for, taking some time off, choked the dick a few times when they asked him to do different things, and he kind of froze, like with that, general manager thing, the new character. But even before, like skipping out on shows to deal with family business, it seemed like people kind of got sick of his shit, and I think with the WWE, it's such a temporal company anyway. They just hire and fire people like people change underwear. I just think that Hornswoggle getting 10 years out of that company is good for him. And he goes into some really good details about the different ways he got money from he doesn't say the numbers of what he got paid, but he talks about the different income sources from t-shirt sales and stuff. I thought that was pretty interesting. I didn't realize, or I forgot, that Hornswoggle was in a Muppets movie. He's a big Muppets fan. I guess he's got 10 or 15 tattoos of Muppets on his leg. He says that's one of the disadvantages of being a midget, is you don't have enough leg meat to get more Muppets tattoos. So he's got a really good sense of humor. I mean, I found his sense of humor to be quite charming. And I found like, this is a cool guy. Like, I like Hornswoggle. He talks about some of the people that you wouldn't suspect that gave him a hard time in later years with his run. Ron the Truth Killings, apparently. Those t-shirt guns that they have at the live events? Well, apparently you're supposed to hold down the button for 2 seconds to get it charged up, and then it releases the gun. And I guess Ron the Truth, according to Hornswoggle, Ron the Truth or R-Truth held that button for like 8 seconds and then pulled the trigger and shot Hornswoggle in the belly and fucked up his, gave him a big bruise. And so you can see that some of this bullying, like Hornswoggle's very, I think, respectful of the wrestling world, respectful of the dressing room, respectful of the locker room, respectful of his co-wrestlers. But you can tell, I mean, some of these things, I guess this is his receipt, as they say in the wrestling business, to kind of expose some of the people that were maybe R-Truth didn't know what he was doing, but still everyone, sings a song about R-Truth, how great he is, but here's a moment where he's not so great, okay? Oddly enough, Hornswoggle puts over, in a good way, people that wrestling fans have been told are bullies, JBL and Bob Holly, to be exact. He tells a nice story of Hornswoggle, as he says several times, had a few drinks too many. Too many adult beverages, and Bob Holly had to put Hornswoggle under his arm like a football, and he and JBL took him upstairs to the hotel and put him in bed so that he wouldn't be seen drunk by Vince McMahon. So I thought that was interesting. I also thought what was interesting is I've read a lot of pro wrestling books, a lot of shoot interviews, as you know. I've conducted some myself. I have a pro wrestling trivia book up on Amazon, Pro Wrestling Trivia by Mike Messier. Okay, Kindle Vella. Play the first 3 chapters are free. But basically, this era that Hornswoggle was in, kind of that 2006 to 2016, I think that was a tough era for a lot of wrestling fans. Like I said, a lot of the big stars like The Rock, Stone Cold, they weren't active. We did have a lot of great wrestlers still. You had Edge, you had The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, second half of his career, Triple H, but there was also that, getting away from the Raw Attitude Era and even the fucking whatever era, the Ruthless Aggression. It was a PG product, and you did have things like the Muppets hosting Raw and stuff. And so a lot of people kind of soured on WWE in that time. And I felt that this was a really interesting book because this is probably the first book that I've heard that takes you into the dressing room of that era. You know, not the 1992 WCW or the 1985 Hulk Hogan WWF or any other era. This is like an interesting era to read about or to hear about, just because we haven't heard a lot of these stories, in my opinion. Also, some of the interesting thing about CM Punk. I mean, Hornswoggle's got some real interesting revelations about CM Punk that I think are worth noting. I won't ruin them for you. And like I said, I think Hornswoggle, one of the endearing things of this book, even though sometimes I get frustrated as an entertainer hearing when he kind of, you know, lets some opportunities fall by him, I feel frustrated for him. And I know that he's frustrated for himself. But also I related to, he acted in a remake of the Leprechaun movie for WWE Films, and they just totally botched the whole movie. And it just sounds like a really disappointing experience, and I've kind of been there. I have been there in certain situations in entertainment industry. So I feel your pain, Dylan. I don't know what he's up to these days. You know, I mean, I think, could there be a spot for Dylan in AEW or Impact Wrestling? I mean, I really don't know. I think there could be. I think one thing that Dylan was always pushing for is he just wanted to wrestle, like real matches. You know, and he does admit that he's getting a little bit older now, and maybe now he's at the point where it would be really hard for him to wrestle. And he's very honest that his condition, I don't remember the exact name of the condition, but it causes, you know, some arthritis, some aches and pain type of stuff, and then he's struggled with his weight, which he's honest about. And I found all that stuff to be very human. And I think, you know, hey, look, like a lot of people, I don't happen to have, as far as I know, it's been a long time since I had a little person as a friend. I did at one point in my life, a long time ago. He was actually, his birth name was Doug, but he went by another name. He was a Hare Krishna gentleman. Gopal, I think was his name, Gopal. But he was born Doug. And he was, you know, a little, whatever the fuck, little person, midget, whatever. I think he was actually a dwarf, not a midget. But Gopal, I haven't seen him in forever. So Gopal, if you're out there, Hari. Nice guy. Nice guy. But I haven't had a good midget friend in a while. So, you know, I'm about due. So I enjoyed Dylan's book. I thought he's a cool guy. I hope there's, you know, other people, if you fucking whatever the fuck came across this video and you're saying, gee whiz, what is this? This is one, I guess this will be on One Pro Wrestling Fan. I have several channels now. I have one Mike Messier YouTube channel that's kind of rants like this, but more like film reviews and other personal situations. I have One Man in a Camera Films, which is my own films. The award-winning Disregard the Vampire Mike Messier documentary, the award-winning The Impeccable, they're all on there. And then this channel has all my archives, and I'm going to concentrate on pro wrestling stuff here for the time being. So there you have it, folks. Hornswoggle, my review of his book. I say it's a thumbs up. If you don't like to read books, listen to the audiobook. It's on Audible. If you have Audible Prime membership, Premium Plus, whatever the fuck, it's part of the membership. If you don't, I guess you have to buy it, okay? I know your whole generation likes to freeload and get stuff for free. But I think it's nice to support the fucking writer for a change. That's it, folks. Speaking of which, you can go to your upper right on my page if you happen to be on a desktop or fucking TV or whatever the fuck. Click on my Amazon pages and buy some of my books. My wonderful books. Fighter Play Basketball is a great one if you like sports. I also am now selling my original art on eBay. Look at that. Isn't that fantastic? These are one of a fucking kind Mike Messier artworks for sale on the Foreign Object eBay store. Very exciting, very profound. There's also pro wrestling action figures over there. Other stuff that I'm downsizing a bit. I'm always upsizing. I'm always downsizing. I'm always doing something. So that's it, folks. So Hornswoggle. Life is short and so am I. I give it a thumbs up and another thumbs up. Good job, Dylan.